The broken ship and the stranger Jack had been drifting between the quiet asteroid fields for 3 days. His small cargo ship carrying nothing but spare parts and food rations. He liked the silence out here, away from busy space stations and loud markets. The hum of his engines was the only sound. A steady heartbeat in the empty dark. Then the signal came. It was faint at first. Just a flicker on his console, a weak distress beacon that pulsed like a dying heartbeat. Jack leaned forward. Adjusting the receiver, the message was old, damaged, but still repeating. It carried a royal code, something only high-ranking alien leaders used. Curiosity burned inside him. Royal ships never came this deep into uncharted space unless they were running from something. He hesitated for a moment, wondering if this could be a trap. Pirates often faked distress calls to lure in victims. But something about the broken, static-filled tone made him think it was real. He changed course. The coordinates led him through a narrow asteroid pass, where rocks the size of houses floated silently. A glimmer of light appeared between them, and then the shape of a ship came into view. Jack's breath caught. It was massive, 10 times the size of his cargo hauler, with elegant, curved wings and golden markings along its hull. But the beauty was scarred. Entire sections were torn open, panels hung loose, and smoke drifted into space. He docked his ship carefully. The royal vessel's docking bay doors were stuck half open, forcing him to squeeze through. Inside, it was chaos. The lights flickered, alarms wailed weakly, and the smell of burnt metal filled the air. And then he saw her. She stood in the middle of the bay, tall and proud, even though her left arm was wrapped in blood-soaked cloth. Her skin was pale silver, her hair dark like midnight, and a crown-like headpiece rested slightly crooked on her head. Her eyes, sharp and golden, locked on him with suspicion. "State your name," she said. Her voice steady but edged with exhaustion. "Jack," he replied, keeping his hands where she could see them. "I picked up your distress signal." She didn't thank him. Instead, she stepped closer, her boots making a soft clang on the metal floor. "Do you know who I am?" "I'm guessing you're the owner of this wreck," he said, trying to sound calm. Her jaw tightened. "I am Queen Serenia of the Virellan Empire." Jack's stomach sank. He had heard of the Virellans, proud, powerful, and not exactly friendly to humans, if the stories were true. They saw humans as unpredictable creatures, sometimes useful, sometimes dangerous. "What happened here?" He asked, glancing at the destroyed walls. "We were attacked," she said. "My guards are dead, my crew gone, and my ship is dying." He looked past her at the control panels. The main engines were offline, the navigation system barely functional. Whoever had attacked her had wanted her alive, not destroyed. That was strange and dangerous. "I can fix it," Jack said without thinking. Her eyes narrowed. "And why would you help me? Human?" Jack shrugged. "Because you're going to die out here if I don't." She stared at him for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether he was brave or just foolish. Then she turned sharply and motioned for him to follow. They walked through the ship's corridors, the walls vibrating faintly from failing systems. Jack noticed strange symbols carved into the metal, ancient Virellan designs. The Queen's presence was commanding even in her weakened state. Every step she took seemed deliberate, as if she refused to let injuries slow her down. Finally, they reached the engine room. It was worse than Jack had imagined. One of the main reactors had been hit directly, coolant leaking across the floor. In a shimmering puddle, sparks flew from the ceiling, and the air was thick with heat. "This is your ship's heart," Jack said, kneeling beside a console. "If we can't restart it, you won't even have life support for another day." The Queen crossed her arms. "Then do it." Jack hesitated. His hands hovered over the controls. The design was unlike anything he had seen, but as he touched the console, something strange happened. The screen flickered, and a glowing Virellan crest appeared. For a second, the lights brightened. The ship recognized him. The Queen's eyes widened. "Impossible," she whispered. "What?" Jack asked, still trying to figure out the system. "No human has ever been accepted by a royal vessel." She said slowly, "Once you repair it, you will be bound by law to me." Jack froze. Bound? How? In service, in loyalty. "Perhaps more," she said, her gaze never leaving his face. The engines groaned as he started the first sequence. He didn't know if she was telling the truth or just trying to scare him, but one thing was certain: if he walked away, she would die. If he stayed, he might be stepping into something far more dangerous than he understood. As the lights in the engine room flickered again, the Queen took a slow step toward him. Her voice was quiet. "Now," almost a whisper, "choose carefully. Human, outside, somewhere in the darkness." A shadow moved past the ship's hull, unseen but close. Jack worked in silence, the hum of damaged systems filling the air like a faint heartbeat. The Queen stood behind him, watching every move he made. Her golden eyes seemed to burn into his. Back, reminding him that every second he spent here was a second closer to whatever binding she had spoken of. "Your hands are steady," she said after a while, her voice low but sharp. "You are no ordinary trader." Jack kept his eyes on the wiring. "I've fixed ships before," he replied, "but never one that came with legal consequences." She didn't smile. "In my culture, repairing the royal vessel without permission is the same as swearing loyalty to its queen." Jack glanced at her over his shoulder. "I didn't swear anything. You didn't have to," she said calmly. "The ship knows who touches its heart." He went back to work, trying to ignore the weight of her words. The damage was worse than he had thought. Whoever attacked her had been precise, hitting systems that crippled movement but left the Queen alive. That meant they wanted her. Not her ship. Who were they? Jack asked, tightening a connector. She was silent for a moment, then said, "Traitors from my own empire." Her tone carried no emotion, but Jack could feel the cold steel beneath it. "They will follow until I am captured. Or until they are dead." Jack's stomach tightened. He had walked into something dangerous, and now there was no easy way out. Still, he wasn't the type to leave a wounded ship or a wounded person behind. The floor shook, a faint tremor, but enough to make him look up. The Queen moved to a nearby panel, her fingers dancing over the controls. "Pirate scanners," she said flatly. "They have detected us." "How close?" Jack asked. "Too close," she replied. "We have minutes before they reach us." Jack's hands worked faster. He rerouted power from life support to the defense grid. The Queen didn't question his decision. Instead, she moved to the weapons console. Her movements were fluid, practiced. She was no decorative ruler. She was a fighter. The first impact hit like a hammer. The ship groaned, metal screaming in protest. Jack cursed under his breath. "Shields." "Barely holding," she said. "Finish the repairs outside." The black void lit up with flashes of green and gold as the Queen's ship fired back. Jack could hear the deep thud of the cannons, the hiss of overloaded circuits. The Queen's voice was calm in the chaos, calling out enemy positions. Then the second impact came, stronger. Jack felt the floor tilt slightly. "If we take another hit like that, we won't." She interrupted. "I will not die in the hands of thieves." She moved with precision, her weapon systems striking the enemy hard enough to make them retreat for a moment. Jack took the chance to slam the final panel shut. "Done," he said. The Queen's eyes flicked toward him. "Then you are mine." Jack frowned. "I told you it is not a choice," she said, stepping closer. "You have touched the heart of my ship. You have saved it. That act binds you to me in the eyes of my people. And if I don't accept?" Hay asked, her gaze sharpened. "Then you will be hunted, not just by my enemies, but by my empire. The thought made his skin crawl. You're telling me that fixing your engine just signed my life away? Yes, she said without hesitation before he could answer. The pirate ship fired again. The blast rattled the hull. The Queen spun back to her console, launching a counterattack. Jack felt the deck shift under his boots as they returned fire. Hold on, she ordered. Her voice was unshaken. The ship's cannons roared. A burst of light flashed across the viewport, and then silence. The scanners showed nothing but empty space. The pirates were gone. Jack exhaled. Well, that was fun. She didn't smile. This was only the first wave. They will come again, stronger. Jack rubbed the back of his neck. So what now? Now, she said, her tone softer but no less commanding. You finish the repairs, then we leave this place. Together, Jack hesitated. His old life had been simple, trading goods, fixing small ships, avoiding trouble, but now, trouble had found him, and it had a crown. As he turned back to his tools, he realized the truth. Whether he wanted to or not, he had just stepped into the service of a queen. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a question whispered, was this the beginning of his greatest adventure, or the start of his downfall? The ship drifted quietly through the black void, engines humming low. The worst of the damage was repaired, but the systems were still unstable. Jack was tightening the last bolts on a power relay when the lights flickered again. Then the floor beneath him seemed to disappear. His feet floated upward, and his tools drifted from his hands. Gravity's gone, he muttered, pushing himself toward the nearest handle. From across the corridor, the Queen's voice came sharp but calm. Main stabilizers failed. We will have to wait until the backup system charges. Jack floated into the main hall. Gripping the doorway to steady himself, he found the Queen. There, one hand hooked into a wall strap. Her silver hair floated around her face like a cloud, and her golden eyes studied him with a strange mix of curiosity and calculation. I guess sleeping is going to be interesting tonight, Jack said. Her gaze shifted toward the darkened corridors. Not here. The cold will creep in without gravity. The life support in most areas is too weak. So where do we go? He asked. She hesitated for a moment, then pointed toward the captain's quarters. It is the warmest room. The emergency heat is concentrated there. Jack raised an eyebrow. The captain's quarters. As in, your room? Her expression didn't change. Yes, unless you prefer to freeze. He decided not to argue. They pushed off the walls, drifting toward the upper level. In the absence of gravity, every movement felt slow and deliberate. The Queen moved with an elegance that reminded Jack she was used to space travel, used to controlling her body in any environment. When they reached the door, it slid open to reveal a large, dimly lit chamber. A round bed rested in the center, surrounded by control panels and a view of the endless stars. Warm air washed over them as they entered. Close the door, she said, her tone leaving no room for discussion. Jack obeyed, letting the seal hiss shut behind him. He floated toward the edge of the bed. Feeling slightly awkward, she didn't seem bothered at all. Instead, she removed the damaged armor plates from her shoulders and set them aside underneath. Her clothing was light, but still regal, designed for movement as much as ceremony. You're hurt, Jack said, nodding toward her arm. It will heal, she replied simply. But her voice softened. You have skill with machines, human, but you also see things. You notice more than most. Jack leaned back against the wah. It's hard not to notice when someone nearly gets killed right in front of me. She watched him for a long moment, her golden eyes unreadable. Do you fear me? He thought about it. Not exactly. Her lips curved slightly, not a smile. But something close. Most who meet a Virellan queen would say otherwise. The silence stretched between them. Outside, the stars seemed to drift slowly past. The wide viewport, Jack felt the hum of the ship's systems, steady but faint, like the ship itself was resting after the battle. "You still haven't told me who those attackers were," Jack said, breaking the quiet. "They were once my own," she said, her tone like steel. "Men and women who swore loyalty, but whose loyalty was bought by my enemies, and they want you alive," he gasped. "Yes," she said, "because I know things they cannot learn from anyone else, things that could end wars. Or start them." Jack floated closer to the edge of the bed. "Sounds like trouble." "It is," she said, without hesitation. "And now you are in it with me." He gave a dry laugh. "Lucky me." For a moment, her eyes softened. "Perhaps. It is not luck. Perhaps it is fate." Jack didn't answer. He didn't know if he believed in fate, but he knew this. He was here, with her, in the middle of nowhere, with enemies closing in, and a ship that might fall apart at any moment. As the hours passed, the room grew quieter. The Queen eventually drifted toward the bed. Resting against the wall with her eyes half closed, Jack stayed on the opposite side. But he could still hear the steady rhythm of her breathing when the backup systems finally restored gravity. The shift was gentle. The floor returned beneath them, and his body felt heavy again. The Queen opened her eyes. Her voice calm. "Rest while you can. Tomorrow will not be easy." Jack sat down on the edge of the bed. Glancing out at the endless stars, he didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But one thing was certain. This night had changed something. The distance between them had shrunk, not just in the room, but in the strange bond that was forming outside. Somewhere in the dark, unseen ships might already be hunting them. But for now, inside this quiet chamber, there was only the hum of the engines, the soft warmth of the air, and the presence of a queen who had decided he was hers. The morning cycle began with the ship's dim lights glowing faintly. Jack was already awake, checking the engine room. For any signs of trouble, the repairs he had made were holding. But the damage to the hyperdrive was still a concern. Without it, they could not jump far enough to escape any serious pursuit. The Queen entered silently, her presence filling the narrow space. She wore fresh armor plates over her shoulders, not the ceremonial kind, but the kind meant for battle. Her golden eyes were focused on the console screen in front of him. "Something's wrong," she said, her voice calm but sharp. Jack glanced at the readings. "Engines look fine." "Not the engines," she replied. "The silence," he frowned. "You're saying it's too quiet out there?" She nodded once. "When you are hunted, quiet is never a good sign." Jack turned to the long-range scanner. At first, the display showed only empty space. Then, a faint pulse appeared. Far off, but moving in their direction, he adjusted the settings. And the signal became clearer. "That's a ship," he muttered. "Small, but fast." The Queen studied the readout. "Not just any ship. That's a Virellan scout. They're tracking us for the fleet." Jack felt a knot tighten in his chest. "How long until the others arrive?" "If they're already close, hours," she said. "If not, a day at most." He tapped the console. "We need to jump before they get here, which means you must finish the hyperdrive." She said firmly, "It is our only chance." Jack bent over the main housing. Removing the damaged power couplings, the Queen stood nearby, scanning the surrounding space with a constant, steady gaze. Her posture was unshaken, but he could sense the tension in the air. "Why do they want you alive?" he asked suddenly. She did not look at him. "'Cause I carry the coordinates to something they cannot reach without me." Jack looked up. "Something valuable. Something dangerous," she said. "A weapon older than my empire. Hidden in the stars. If they find it, no one will be safe." The thought made his hands work faster. The more he heard, the less he liked this situation. But it was too late. To turn back, minutes passed in silence except for the sound of tools and the faint hum of the reactor. Then the Queen's voice cut through. The scout has changed course. They're closing faster. Jack cursed under his breath. Then we don't have hours. We have minutes. He connected the last coupling, sparks flashing briefly. The system came to life. The hyperdrive core began to hum, slow at first, then with growing strength. Is it ready? She asked. Almost, Jack replied. But if we push it before it's stable, it could tear the ship apart. The Queen's gaze did not waver. Better to risk that than to be captured. Jack gave a short nod. Then, let's do it. He moved to the pilot's chair, the Queen standing just behind him. The scanner now showed the scout ship as a bright red marker, dangerously close. Coordinates, Jack said. She stepped forward, her fingers moving over the navigation display. This moon system, she said, pointing at a cluster of rocks on the screen. We can hide there, out of their scanners. The hum of the hyperdrive deepened. Warning lights flashing in orange. Jack's hand hovered over the jump control. On your mark now, she ordered. Jack slammed the control. The stars outside blurred into streaks of light. The ship shuddered violently. Alarms blaring. For a moment, he thought the Queen had been wrong. That they had just ripped themselves apart in deep space. Then the shaking stopped. The view outside shifted to reveal a cold, rocky moon, its surface covered in jagged cliffs and deep craters. Jack let out a breath. We made it. The Queen's eyes swept over the scanner. For now, they guided the ship into a shadowed crater, shutting down all non-essential systems to hide their energy signature. The silence returned, heavier. This time, Jack leaned back in his chair. What happens when the fleet gets here? The Queen's voice was steady. Then we fight, or we run again. There will be no peace until they believe I am dead. Jack looked at her, realizing just how far from his old life he had gone. He wasn't a traitor anymore. He was a fugitive, with a Queen whose enemies would stop at nothing. Somewhere beyond the darkness of the crater, a faint signal blinked on the scanner again. The hunt wasn't over. It was just beginning. The ship sat hidden in the shadow of the crater, its hull blending with the jagged moon rocks. Jack had powered down most systems, leaving only life support and minimal sensors. The Queen stood by the viewport, her arms crossed, her gaze locked. On the distant horizon of stars, they're still out there, she said quietly. Jack glanced at the scanner. I see them, the scout ships looping the outer edge of the moon. Looking for us. The Queen's golden eyes shifted toward him. When they don't find us, they'll call in the fleet. Jack nodded slowly. Which means we have to move before that happens. For hours, they waited in silence. Every minute felt heavier, like the darkness outside was pressing against the hull. The Queen didn't move, her posture rigid. Jack wondered how many times she'd faced situations like this. Finally, the scanner beeped. The red marker of the enemy ship began to drift away. They're leaving, Jack said. Not leaving, the Queen replied, just widening their search. Jack powered up the engines. Then we'll slip out while they're not looking. As the ship lifted from the crater, dust and small stones floated upward. The Queen moved to the co-pilot seat, her hands hovering over the navigation controls. Where to? Jack asked. She pointed at a faint cluster of stars on the display. There, an old mining belt, dense with debris. Perfect cover for a ship our size. Jack adjusted the course. The engines purred softly, and the moon's gray surface fell away. Beneath them, soon, the darkness of space wrapped around them again. They entered the mining belt within an hour. Broken asteroids drifted lazily, some glowing faintly from old mining scars. Jack weaved the ship between them with careful hands. The Queen kept scanning for signs of pursuit. You fly well, she said at last. Jack smirked faintly. Good enough to stay alive. That is all that matters, she replied, though there was a trace of something warmer in her voice. Hours passed, the stars shifted slowly, and the endless debris field became their shield. At last, Jack set the ship to drift among the rocks. Letting it move naturally with the belt's rotation, we can rest here, he said. No one will find us in this mess. The Queen gave a short nod, removing her armor plates and setting them aside. Without them, she looked less like a ruler and more like a person. Her shoulders still held the weight of command. But there was a quiet tiredness in her eyes. Jack opened a ration pack, handing her one without a word. She took it, examining the plain human food before tasting it. Not terrible, she said. High praise, Jack replied with a small grin for the first time since they met. Her lips curved into the faintest smile. It was gone a moment later, replaced by her usual calm, but Jack had noticed it. And it stayed in his mind. After they ate, the Queen leaned back, her gaze drifting to the viewport. When I was young, I thought the stars were mine to command, she said softly. I never imagined I would be hiding among them like prey. Jack didn't know what to say. He could tell her pride had been wounded as much as her body. Hiding's not losing. He said finally, it's just buying time. She turned her eyes to him, studying his face. And what will you do when the time runs out, human? Jack looked out at the stars. Guess I'll decide when it happens. Silence settled again. Outside, the asteroids drifted slowly, casting shadows across the ship. The hum of the engines was soft, almost like breathing, when night cycle came. The Queen moved to her quarters, but after a few minutes, she returned, standing in the doorway to the small sleeping space near the cockpit. The cold in my room is worse, she said simply, stepping inside. Jack didn't argue. She sat on the narrow bench beside him, the faint warmth of her presence filling the quiet cabin. They didn't speak. But the silence wasn't uncomfortable. Somewhere beyond the mining belt, the enemy fleet was still searching. The danger hadn't passed. It had only paused, but for this moment, drifting among the stars. They were safe. Jack leaned back, closing his eyes briefly. The Queen's steady breathing beside him was oddly calming. He knew the fight wasn't over, but he also knew something had changed between them. This wasn't just survival anymore. It was something else, something unspoken. The mining belt had given them a day of quiet, but quiet never lasted in deep space. Jack knew it, and the Queen knew it by the second morning cycle. The scanner showed faint ripples in the belt's movement, signs that something big was pushing through the debris. They've found our trail, the Queen said. Her voice steady but sharper than usual. Jack adjusted the scanner's range. Looks like 2, maybe 3 ships. Scouts, she said. The fleet will not be far behind. Jack felt a heavy weight settle in his chest. They couldn't keep running forever. The hyperdrive was still delicate from the last repairs. One wrong jump could tear the ship apart. The Queen stepped closer to him, her golden eyes fixed on his face. I will give you a choice, human, she said quietly. When we reach the next station, you may leave. You can go back to your life before this. Jack stared at her. And what about you? I will keep running, she replied, or I will face them. But your life does not need to end because you crossed my path. For a moment, the offer tempted him. He imagined docking at a safe station, finding a quiet cargo job again, repairing harmless ships and sleeping without looking over his shoulder. But the image didn't feel real anymore. You're not making this easy, Jack said with a faint, dry laugh. It is not meant to be easy, she answered. It is meant to be honest. He turned back to the controls. We'll decide when we get there. Before she could respond, the proximity alarm screamed. A red light flashed across the console. The scouts had closed in faster than expected, too small. Sleek ships now moved into attack position, their weapons powering up, shields Up, Jack said quickly. The Queen moved to the weapons console without hesitation. Her fingers flew over the controls. The first enemy shot lit up the black space with a flash of green. The impact shook the ship. Jack spun the vessel between two massive asteroids. Using the debris for cover, the Queen returned fire, her shots striking one scout and sending it. Spinning out of control, the second scout stayed close, firing in short bursts. Jack dodged left, then right, the ship groaning under the strain. "They're hurting us," he said. "Trying to push us out into open space. They will regret it," the Queen replied coldly. Another shot hit their rear shield. Jack gritted his teeth. Shields won't hold much longer. The Queen glanced at him, her voice low but fierce. "Then we end this quickly." She locked weapons on the remaining scout and fired a concentrated blast. The explosion lit the asteroid field, fragments spinning into the dark. For a moment, only the hum of the engines remained. Jack checked the scanners again. Clear. For now, the Queen stepped away from the weapons console, her breathing even, but her hands still tense. "This is what your life will be if you stay," she said, running, fighting, never resting. Jack met her gaze. "Then maybe I'll just have to get used to it." Something shifted in her eyes, a flicker of something that wasn't command or formality. It was softer, more human. "That is your choice," she said quietly. "But understand this, if you stay, you are not just a passenger, you are mine in the eyes of my people. That bond will not be broken." Jack thought of the long hours repairing her ship, of the quiet moments in the captain's quarters, of the way she had stood between him and danger without hesitation. "Then I guess it's a promise," he said. Her lips curved slightly. Almost a smile. So be it. The ship drifted deeper into the asteroid belt, the distant stars shimmering. Like cold fire, somewhere far away, the rest of the enemy fleet was still searching. But for now, in the quiet between battles, the promise had been made. The ship was quiet again, drifting far from the mining belt. Jack had steered them into a stretch of empty space with no signals. No asteroids, no interruptions. The stars stretched endlessly outside the viewport, cold and still. The repairs were complete now. The hyperdrive purred like it had never been damaged. The hull was patched, the weapons online. The Queen's ship was ready for war. But for the first time since Jack had boarded it, there was no battle to fight. He sat in the pilot's chair, letting the ship drift. His hands rested on the controls. Out of habit, but his mind wandered. He thought about the promise they had made in the asteroid belt, the unspoken agreement that had tied him to her more than any law could. The Queen entered the cockpit quietly. She wasn't wearing her armor now. Only a simple dark tunic that made her look less like a ruler and more like someone who had been carrying a burden too heavy for too long. "It is done," she said, her voice softer than usual. "The ship is whole again." Jack nodded. "So, where to now?" She didn't answer right away. Her gaze moved to the stars outside. "Wherever I go, the hunt will follow," she said. "But with you here, perhaps I do not need to run quite as fast." Jack gave a faint smile. "That's the nicest thing you've said to me." She turned her golden eyes toward him. "Do not let it go to your head." Silence settled between them. Not heavy this time, but calm. The hum of the engines filled the air. Steady and warm. After a while, Jack rose from the chair, stretching his arms. "I'm going to get some sleep," he said. The Queen tilted her head slightly. "In your quarters?" He hesitated. "Yeah. Why?" She stepped closer, her expression unreadable. "In my people's tradition, when a bond is made, distance between those bound is unusual." Jack blinked. "You mean," she cut him off with a faint nod, "I mean that I will sleep beside you. It is normal. Do not think too much of it." Jack let out a quiet laugh. "Right? Normal." They walked together through the corridor, the dim lights casting long shadows along the walls when they reached his small cabin. She stepped inside without hesitation. Jack followed. Still not sure what to make of the situation. The bed was narrow, built for one. But the Queen didn't seem concerned. She sat at the edge, removing her boots with slow, deliberate movements. Then she lay down, her gaze still fixed on him. Jack lingered near the doorway. "You really don't see anything strange about this?" Her voice was calm. "It is strange for you, perhaps not for me." He shook his head with a small smile, then crossed the room and sat beside her. The warmth of her presence was immediate. The quiet strength in the way she carried herself, even at rest, was impossible to ignore. The lights dimmed automatically as the night cycle began. Shadows wrapped around the room, leaving only the faint glow of the stars through the small viewport. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Jack lay on his back, staring at the ceiling, aware of every small movement beside him. The Queen's breathing was slow, steady, almost soothing. He thought about everything that had happened since the moment he'd found her ship. The distress signal, the repairs, the battles, the quiet nights in the captain's quarters, the promise in the asteroid belt. Now, here she was, lying beside him like it was the most natural thing in the universe, somewhere out in the dark. Her enemies were still searching. He knew danger would come again, maybe tomorrow, maybe weeks from now, but right now, the danger felt far away. She shifted slightly, her voice quiet but clear. "Sleep, human. Tomorrow the stars will test us again." Jack closed his eyes, letting the hum of the engines and the steady rhythm of her breathing pull him into rest. In that moment, it didn't matter if he was her protector, her partner, or something else entirely. All that mattered was that he was here. And she had chosen to be here too. Somewhere deep inside, Jack knew this was no ordinary journey anymore. This was the start of something neither of them could walk away from.